Hello, my name is John Pisacreta, and I interviewed Professor David Cuberes from Spain. The interview date was October 1st, 2020. For my pre-research, I looked up some things about the Spanish culture and familiarized myself with that. One thing that I found very interesting was the culture was very religious. About 94% of the population is identifies themselves as Roman Catholics. Also, Spanish are very into art and architecture. One thing that I really thought was cool, that's been a tradition since 1710 AD, was bullfighting and bull riding. I thought that was very interesting. You always see videos and pictures of people holding the red bandanas trying to get the bulls to come, and I think that's super cool and super interesting. So I'll start by actually identifying some cultural differences that Professor Cuberes identified from the get-go. First thing about his schooling. So he went to elementary school at a semi-private school that was somewhat religious and somewhat not. He had to go to religious classes, but his family in particular was not very religious, which is somewhat surprising because of how important religion is to Spain. He also identifies himself as a Catalan, not Spanish. That is one of the three districts in Spain, and he is in lived outside of Barcelona. So he has three children, and growing up in the United States and growing up in Spain, there were some major differences. One of the first ones he pointed to was the school day. He would go to school at 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. and would have a break at 1 p.m. to 3:30. A common stereotype that he mentioned was that students and other people in other countries believed that the Spanish would take a siesta during that 1 to 3:30 break, and that they love taking siestas and that they're lazy. That is something that I did when I did some research. I saw that was the case, and I saw that there was some bias around that. But I did not bring it up. He did bring it up himself. So that was one of the major differences. He said that during that break he would either do schoolwork, play guitar, or play with his friends and eat lunch with his family. So he likes the school day in America a lot better, where there's no breaks and they go from 7 a.m. to about 2:30 or 3 p.m. One of the main differences in philosophies of teaching growing up, he believed, was that in his school it was a lot more traditional. So he would go to school, be taught the material, learn the material, and then take a test to see your understanding of the material. In the United States, they take a more constructivism approach, and that is something that we learned in Chapter 4 of Affirming Diversity, where a lot of the students are able to use their prior knowledge, use things that they've learned and experienced to enhance their learning. So he believes that the United States does a very good job of in-class presentations, working in teams, group activities, and that he believes that his kids are getting more out of their education because of that. So one of the things that he really liked to do in his free time, which I thought was also very interesting, was play the guitar. One thing that he mentioned was that the Spanish did not have a very large after-school or activity program, or the Catalan, excuse my language, did not have a very big after-school program for sports or activities. So they would pretty much go to school from 9 to 5, and then he'd be home and done for the day, doing homework for the rest of the day. Opposed to the United States, where we have a plethora of activities at their school. If it's either sports, bands, choir, clubs, anything. And that I thought was fairly interesting as well. Another thing that I learned about Professor Cuberes was his education. So he got his master's in Barcelona, and he ended up getting his PhD at the University of Chicago in Illinois. And something that I found was very interesting was that the way he approached his education. I mean, doing all of your schooling in Barcelona and then stepping outside your comfort zone and going to a brand new country by yourself to pursue something else was very courageous, and I admired him for that. One thing I asked him about was if he saw any differences really in between the PhD program and his master's program in Barcelona, and he said not in particular. I asked him if there was any discrimination against him, and he said not in particular, because the rest of his class was all similarly from foreign countries. He said there was only 3 Americans in his PhD program, which was super cool, and that his professor encouraged him to use his culture to help him with research and help him with his papers and whatnot. So one other thing that I found pretty interesting about his culture at Catalin is that so he's trying to bring some of those values over to the United States to help and then instill in his children. They still go to Spain twice a year during the summer and during Christmas. Sadly, they haven't been able to go this year due to COVID. But he has 3 children, and the language he speaks is a mix of Spanish and French, he says. It's a romantic language. The children are young, and he finds it extremely important to instill some of the cultures from Catalin into his children. So he tries to create some Spanish dishes like, what was it called? Or some of the Spanish dishes. One of their favorites was churros, obviously, the dessert. And then there's a lot of seafood because of how Spain geography is laid out. There's a lot of seas and bays that are around the border. So seafood was a big cultural value that he brought over, and they eat a lot of fish. They try to have Sunday lunches, which was a huge thing when he was home with his extended family, and they try to eat dinner together every night. And those are some of the things that he brought over from what his family taught him. So he taught in the UK and in Spain and the United States. One of the main differences that he found was that the United States students are a lot more active participation-wise. When he goes to Spain and the UK, he felt like he was more of the dominant figure, and the kids were kind of just there to be there. They didn't really want to learn. They were just kind of, their parents were either forcing them to be there, or they were just timid and coming up to the professor and asking for help and whatnot. And that's what he found that was even more difficult in his classrooms at Clark University today. A lot of students from different cultures, and he said genders, did not come to his office hours, even when they are struggling in the class. And I think that is because they grow up in a culture where they're not supposed to ask for help. They're supposed to figure things out on their own. But I could be completely wrong. That is an assumption I am making. Some things that I can relate to is so I asked him a question in regards of multicultural education, and how we've talked about in class and in the readings how it should be a philosophy, not just incorporated in the curriculum. Professor Cuberes has tried to incorporate it in his curriculum, but has struggled at times. So we had a conversation regarding what he can do, and I talked about critical pedagogy a little bit, as well as constructivism. I think is an important way, especially the way that classes function as lectures. I don't think you get as much group work or as much interaction with students during the lecture. I think that can be very valuable in classes, and I'm not telling them how to teach, but I just gave them some ideas. But a big thing that we talk about in class is that how it needs to be a philosophy. Multicultural education needs to be a philosophy. It can't just be incorporated in our curriculums. We need to be able to talk about this in our government at levels like that. And we see certain examples today, like the NBA, I think, is doing an unbelievable job with the way that they're promoting Black Lives Matter. They are still doing their season and have all types of social justice phrases on the back of their jerseys instead of their names to promote it. They boycotted a day of games just so that they could talk to legislations in their state to see what they can do. I think there's a lot that we can do, and I think some of these discussions are hard, as Professor Cuberes mentioned. They are very difficult to have, and he felt like that at times some of the students were not as respected, and they did not feel comfortable in the classroom. And I think that's super important. We have to find a way to make students feel comfortable and want to be engaged in these conversations and engaged in learning and engaged in making change. Taking affirmative action is another great example that we use from affirming diversity. So the more that we take action and we promote our students to take action and create change, I think the better that they can be and the better the world can be in general. Thank you.